Are you a parent wondering if you're doing right by your kids?
A therapist looking for real-world applications and working with children and their parents?
A teacher trying to navigate educating the whole child in today's world?
Then this is the podcast for you.
Hi, I'm Brigid.
And I'm Jenna.
And we are the teacher and the therapist.
A little bit about us. We are best friends. Now, if you ask us how long we've been best friends, that's up for debate.
It's forever.
It's been about 3.5 to 4 years. But maybe we'll get into that story another time. Just as an intro, my name is Jenna. I am a licensed professional clinical counselor in Ohio and Illinois, and I got my master's in counseling back in 2020. What a time. And I work primarily with children, adults who have childhood trauma, as well as their parents, of course, children and their parents. What about you, Brigid?
So I'm a teacher. I've been teaching since about 2011 when I graduated with my bachelor's in education. And I did a lot of focusing on child development and psychology. And I also have 2 kids of my own. So I have lots of kids, all different types of kids. And it's going to be fun to kind of unpack what we do.
Heck yeah. So for the first episode today, we thought it would be fun to go into how do you answer those tough kid questions.
Yeah, this episode was actually inspired by my son, Jay, who today decided to ask me, Mommy, are humans made of meat? And so just those kind of things that give you pause that you're like, wait, what do I say to this? So we have some questions we've been asked. Jenna's been asked a lot of questions throughout her time as a therapist, obviously, and in the classroom, kids will ask you all types of stuff. So Jenna, why don't you start with one of our first questions?
Well, I want to know how you answered the, Mommy, are humans made of meat?
My only response was, sort of, and by that time he didn't care anymore. He was off running around fighting with his brother, so.
Yeah, sometimes that's the beauty of it. That's all you got to do.
They don't need a real answer.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess that was our first question. The second one is getting it a little bit deeper. The question is, where is Grandma? Or an alternative, am I going to die one day?
This is definitely a question that comes up a lot with kids just throughout life. I mean, these kids are seeing their family members, grandparents often passing away, and they want to know what's happening and is it going to happen to me?
Right. Yes, this is definitely something I've come across in working with kids in counseling, and I've actually had parents approach me or guardians and say, hey, Mom died, Dad died, can you tell the kid?
Yeah. How does that go for you?
That's a hard no for me. I always, offer to facilitate the conversation, but that needs to come from the parent. So sometimes the parent and I, or the guardian, the grown-up that's then taking care of the kid, will preemptively talk or have our own session so that I can best support them, but I much prefer the words to come out of their mouth.
So when the parents are telling them, Jenna, do you suggest saying something like something that they're sleeping or something like that? Or what do you recommend that those parents say?
So I actually do not recommend saying something like they're sleeping or any euphemisms that we use. Oh, they're in a better place, they've passed away, especially with young kids. Which the situations I'm thinking about were young children, and they don't understand that. They're very concrete. You need to be direct, and my advice for probably all these questions we're getting into is to be honest in an age-appropriate way. Because we certainly don't want to create more fear in kids of, okay, if I go to sleep tonight, am I not going to wake up? Because Grandma went to sleep, quote unquote, and I've never seen her again.
Yeah, so we definitely want to steer away from that and be honest with them.
Yeah, honesty is definitely best. So, for example, am I going to die? If it's a young child, if they're, 3, 4 years old, and Mommy, are you going to die one day, or am I going to die? You just say, yep, one day. Or you could say, yes, in a long, 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 long time, or something like that. You don't want to say no, or it could bring in shame. Why are you asking that? Things like that. So just a simple yes, and like we said with are humans made of meat, they might just say, okay, and move on.
And wander away.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to note, too, that, death and dead and died are not bad words. We try to avoid the word died often and say something that we think sounds nicer, like passed away. But it's okay to say they died or they are dead. That it's just a simple fact. It's not a bad thing. I mean, it's sad for us, of course, who are left, but it's the truth, and that's something that we need to embrace with kids, and all of the sadness and heartache that comes with it is okay.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a big thing, too. It's just okaying the feelings, right? Of like, it's okay if you're sad. It's okay if you're mad that this person is gone, or you're sad that you're not going to see grandma anymore. Another situation that I have heard of or run across is if the children have never met the person. So as they get older, they might realize, like, oh, like, why doesn't my dad have a mommy? And so that can be tricky when it's like, well, Daddy, do you have a mommy? And how you answer a question like that.
It's definitely, that could be triggering for the parent that's being asked it too, and they want to say that they don't know what to say because it's a hard loss to deal with, and then to pass along to your child that grief can feel wrong. But again, it's okay. Their emotions are okay, and so are yours.
Yeah, absolutely. And showing the emotions, if you're asked that question and you tear up or start to cry, like, that's okay too, that they can see that, it's hard for you. So a question like that, again, the honesty, like, yes, I have a mom, she died, right? She died before you were born, or whatever the case might be.
All right, so our next question is kind of a fun one. It's where do babies come from?
Oof.
That's one that I think it comes up a lot, right? Kids are always wondering, where do babies come from? Where do babies come from? I know with my kids that it's been very simple. They know that they came from my belly. We just say belly, okay? We don't say uterus and all that. We're not PC. But so they know they came from inside of me. They know they grew inside of me and then came out. Fortunately, that's as far as they care about. They don't want to know how they got there. But someday they're going to ask how they got there, and I don't know what I'll say. Jenna, what do you think?
Yikes. So this is not a question I've been asked by any of my clients, which I'm thankful for. I think it's a little tricky for me too, and I don't know, Brigid, if you feel similarly of, I don't know, how the parents would respond either. And so even going back to the death question, some families might say, oh, they're in heaven or they're whatever, and some don't believe in that. So what somebody else's child, when they ask me, hey, where do babies come from? That's much different than making the decision for if I had my own children.
Right, because if you believe in God or things like that, you could say, oh, God put you in my belly or something along those lines. Or frankly, you can just say mommy and daddy made you, kids don't need to know specifics. They just want an idea. They just want to start to understand things. So telling them, mommy and daddy made you, or if they were adopted, you were made in your other mommy's belly or something like that kind of lets them know that they were formed somehow inside of a womb, and here we are.
Yeah. That's a good one, Brigid. Thank you. So not the stork.
I'm gonna avoid the stork. I don't think that's a great one. We don't need to lie to kids.
Yeah. Okay. Oof. This next question's tough. Why am I dumb, or why am I not good at that?
So that's a question kids come across a lot in the classroom. It's very easy for kids to see other children answering questions faster, finishing their quizzes first, and they wonder, why can't I do that? Why am I not good at that? And something we really focus on in my home and in my classroom is that the praise for kids when they are good at things. Children need to know that there are things that they are good at. It's not the same as everybody else's, and that's okay, but we need to focus on, you did that, or are you proud of yourself? You did such a great job. And it's encouraging for the kids to know that they can be proud when they've done those things.
Yeah.
And then it helps it be easier for them to be proud of their friends, because then I've heard my kids say to each other, are you proud of yourself, when they do something good? And it's like a cute little positivity. They know that you've done this. Even if I didn't do it, you can still be proud. It's still good for you.
Yeah.
So praising kids, I think, is really important, and giving them that. I mean, they're not going to get the internal praise for themselves till we give them the external. So it's got to start somewhere.
I love that. Yeah. I love that. Are you proud of yourself, right? To try to instill that. And so that then they can develop that empathy and be proud for other people as well. I'm a big proponent of what we call labeled praise, and I think we're going to do a whole episode on that, but I use it a lot in my work and kind of coach parents to do that too.
Perfect. So the next question we have is one that I think, Jenna, you probably deal with a lot in therapy.
Yeah.
Why doesn't Daddy live here anymore?
Yeah, another tough one, right? And it is. I would say the majority of the child clients I have right now are have divorced parents, or their parents are divorcing or did divorce, and that's why they started to see me. So it's very common. And I have, plenty of resources, some art activities and things like that. So again, we want to be honest. And in the world of psychology and counseling, usually there's 3 avenues. I blame mom, I blame dad, or whoever the parents are, or I blame myself. And so if at all possible, if we can avoid that, of course we don't want the child to blame themselves. It's not their fault that their parents are separating. And ideally we don't want them to blame either parent either. So again, it depends on the age. If they're older, you can use words like divorced and say, if they're in middle school or high school, like, hey, mom and dad are getting divorced, or your moms are getting divorced, and just telling them that. When they're younger, they're more concrete. So you need to explain what that means. That means that mommy's going to continue to live here and daddy's going to have a new house. And you are going to stay some of the time at this house and some of the time at daddy's house.
Do you think it's better for parents to have those conversations together, or should just mom tell them, or how do you handle that?
Yeah. If at all possible, again, I know it depends on the circumstances of the separation and things like that, but when it's possible, especially with younger kids and even our preteens and teens, I recommend the conversation to be both of them. That way, hopefully, we can prevent some of that resentment towards one or the other. We don't want to be bad-mouthing, well, I'm doing this because your mother did blah, blah, blah. And that way, it's still a united front, right? We're a family, just a different kind of family. We still love you. Those can be really important words to say. We both still love you a lot. This is not your fault. This is not because something that you've done. Sometimes kids, elementary school kids, younger kids, they need to hear those direct words.
You might think it's obvious that it's not because of them, but they don't see it that way.
They don't see it that way, right? Can you imagine you got in trouble, or you got a consequence, and then the next day mommy and daddy sit you down and say, daddy's not going to live here anymore.
Yeah.
Kids can make all kinds of meaning out of that. So,
and I know it can be contentious, right? A divorce can be hard between the parents. But I know I had a child in my class who came to me one day and said, well, my daddy told me that he wants us to be a family still, and mommy won't let that happen. And that just creates so much confusion in the child, and creating that animosity towards mom, because mom doesn't love dad anymore, but and it's one-sided and back and forth, and we don't need to put our kids in the middle as much as you can avoid it. Just letting it be, you're a team for the kids. You made the kids together. Sorry, you're stuck with that.
Right.
So
you're still going to be co-parenting.
You got to figure it out, and figuring out sooner than better is definitely the way to go.
Yeah, sooner rather than later for sure. And Okay. Ooh, Brigid. Why is my skin darker than mommy's?
Ooh, that's a tough one. That can really come up a lot in the classroom. When kids are in a classroom, darker skinned kids or lighter skinned kids or whatever. If you're in a classroom that's mainly one color, you definitely notice and when you stand out. And it's a question that's come up a lot in my classrooms over the years. And I personally, for me, we answer it just simply that everyone's skin color is different. Everyone's hair color is different. Everyone's eye color is different. Everyone is made differently, and it's fine. It's, the skin color, even between the Caucasian kids in the classroom, even between the black kids in the classroom, no one's the exact same skin color.
Right.
And so just accepting that everyone is going to be a little bit different, and you never question, why is he a redhead? Why is she blonde? Why is my hair brown? It just is.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Kids just accept those differences in how we look, but for some reason, skin color is one that we're still hung up on. And we really need to move toward just accepting it for what it is, because everyone's just made the way they are. I mean, even in families, skin colors are different. You don't have the exact same skin tone as your parents or your kids or whatever. So
yeah, I was going to say that's the only thing I was going to add, right? The question obviously geared coming from a child, why is my skin darker than mommy's? Well, the explanation to that might be, well, your daddy has dark skin, and, you know, going back to where do babies come from, mommy and daddy made you together. So you got, you know, some genes from me, and I know genes can be a big word depending on how young the kid is, but using examples like, well, you have blonde hair like mommy and you have darker skin like daddy, or you have, you know, brown eyes like this parent, or vice versa. And so, you know, it might be maybe a little bit more difficult. It could be very nuanced, right? If they are like an interracial adoption and things like that, so nobody in their family looks like them, that might be, you know, some deeper conversations too.
Mm-hmm. But still validating that their skin color is different, just like their hair color, their eye color, their nose shape, their ears. I mean,
everything. Daddy's taller, whatever.
Right. We don't walk around at everyone and say, "Do you have attached or detached earlobes?" Because it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
Your genetic makeup of your physical appearance has so little to do with who you are as a person. And so just like having kids accept that this is who I am, and not just accept it, but embrace it and love themselves comes from looking at those differences, and it makes you special. And and if they are like an adopted child, then you can talk about, well, you know, the mommy that grew you, or anything like that, and it came from them, but we still love you regardless of skin color, of course.
Yeah, definitely.
So along with those different families and adoption families, one that's coming up more and more often these days is, you know, my friend has two mommies, or my friend has two daddies.
Yeah.
How do you handle that in the office, Jenna?
Yeah, so that is something that I've come across. I've actually had a client that was seeing me for something completely unrelated, and months in, the child said, "Did you know my dad's a girl now?" And I was like, "I did not know that." Wow, I've never met your dad, so you know, and so that was, luckily it was just kind of like an informational thing, right? And he was like, "Yeah, I still call him dad." I'm like, "Okay, cool, you know, thanks for letting me know." But it can be tough. So I'm a big proponent of books. I'm actually surprised I haven't brought any up yet with all these questions. But learning through books is huge. I'm sure you can relate to that, working in early childhood. So I have one in my office that's called All Kinds of Families. And that one I use for my younger kids a lot. They're all animals, like in the book, but, you know, it says some live with their cousins, some live with their grandma, some have lots of siblings, so it doesn't just go into the parents, but it's like some have lots of siblings, some have none, some have pets, you know, whatever, and it does go over that. Some people have two mommies. But it is interesting, and Brigid, I wonder how you handle this too in the classroom, because going back to that, I'm always curious of how the family handles it. So
so in the classroom, it's pretty much the same thing, just kind of all families look different, just like all people look different, things are different, right? So just a very simple, they just have two mommies, just like you have a mom and a dad. People are different. Families look different. Sometimes we have grandparents that are the main caregivers, so it's, you know, the child and the grandparent. I know in my classroom, one of the first things we do, you know, the first week or so of school, is the children make not a family tree, but just like they make a house, and they just put a little person for everyone who lives in their house, right?
I like that.
And so then we have these hanging up all year with their family picture and their house that they've made, and they see none of these houses look the same.
No,
Some houses have like just one green for the child and one blue for the dad, and that's it. They only have two circles in their house. Some houses have a circle for a grandparent and a circle for a cousin that's living with them right now, and two circles for a dog. And so they see right off the bat, no one, like, I'm not different because my family is different.
Sure.
All these families are different.
Everyone's families are different.
And just accepting that that's where we are. Like, it doesn't make anything better or worse.
Yeah. Something I've tried to get better at, but I still struggle with myself, and I really like that we've leaned this way, is saying grown-ups instead of, you know, mommy and daddy or parents, because you might not know. You might not know who the grown-ups that the kids live with are. And so just being mindful of that there could be foster children, and they don't call those adults mom and dad. They might call them, you know, Jenna.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just being aware of that for sure.
Yeah, grown-ups is a good inclusive one for sure.
Yeah, because it could be, any grown-ups.
Yep.
Okay, we are going to end on a tough one. I hope you have the answer to this, Brigid. Why do people do bad things?
So that's a really tricky one. I know. I mean, we see that all the time, right? We see, if you are watching the news in front of your kids, they're going to see it. People
they walk in
the world do bad things, and sometimes we don't know why. And sometimes we as adults have that same question.
Sure. And I think that you can validate that. I don't know why they did that, honey. Like, right. I don't know.
Right. And I think that's the biggest thing is a lot of the time we're not going to have an answer for them that is sufficient. So just like embracing that with them and validating that of we don't know why these things happen. Sometimes people make choices that we don't understand.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's really what it comes down to is the choices that someone else made and just kind of reinforcing to them that we can only control ourselves.
Right.
We can only make our own choices.
Right.
And so we do our best to make the world a better place. And, if someone else does something that's not a good choice, as we say in the classroom, then we can't really fix that. We have to just focus on what we're doing.
Yeah.
That is good choices.
Yeah. And something else I see with that as well is, then fear and anxiety coming in. Like, okay, I saw this bad thing. I saw this person got hurt, right? It was on the news, or it was somebody at school was talking about it. Like, is that going to happen to me? And so that's something that I work with a lot of families and parents around. Obviously, if it's something that can be kind of contained, sure, it's hard. But like I said, if you're watching the news and your kid walks into the kitchen while you're making dinner, it happens. But if we can refrain from doing that, maybe that's an option, right? Just to limit some of that exposure.
But we don't need to tell them about it just because it's real.
Right.
So, I know just recently we had the whole thing with former President Trump being shot at the rally. And my husband and I found out about it in the car. And so we're kind of discussing this and, in our worried adult tones of what is going on in the world.
Happened, yeah.
And my son in the back seat pipes up and he's like, what's going on? What's wrong? And of course we were like, oh, it's okay. It's nothing, because he didn't really hear the conversation and realize like, okay, this is not a thing. I mean, they pick up on it.
They do. They hear you. They hear worried.
Yes.
Mommy sounds worried, or, what are they talking about? Why are they whispering?
Right.
They can tell when you change.
So that would be with younger kids. It's just a little bit of limiting the exposure is okay. We don't have to shove things in their faces.
Yeah.
But you're going to have older kids too, right? Preteens, teens, they have their phones, they have access to the internet. Yes. They're going to find out things on their own. And honestly, in their classrooms, in the school, obviously we're hearing about bad things.
Right. We're on the bus
all the time.
Or it's happening in schools.
Right. I mean, and in schools we have these lockdown drills with kids as young as 3 years old.
Right.
And so, sometimes there are people that do bad things, and there is going to be a little bit of that exposure.
Yeah.
And the older kids trying to, I don't know, I guess just rationalize to them that was a choice that they made, and it hurt other people, and so that's why we don't want to do things like that. And I don't know, Jenny, you work with a lot of teens, right? Do they ever have fears about like school shootings, things in the classroom, anything like that?
Yeah, something that actually has come up. I had some kids that were worried about when the conflict or war in Gaza happened, and there was some, I don't think that it ever came out or actually occurred, but they were discussing like, oh, we're going to kind of live stream this, right, on social media. And so that's a conversation I had with a coworker, and was like, hey, are you talking to parents about, if this happens this weekend, it might be a conversation you need to have with your parent or with your teenagers. You might need to take the phone for the day, or say, hey, we're going out, we're going to have a family day or something. But yeah, really just opening the door for those conversations and broaching the topics, because teens and preteens might not.
Yeah.
But if you bring it to the table, then they know it's okay to talk about it. It's okay, even going way back, where do babies come from, right, that we asked at the beginning. We were kind of saying that along the lines of a younger kid, right? You came from my belly or somebody else's belly. But if older kids you can bring the conversations up about sex and about
safe sex.
Safe sex, right. you got to set the stage, right? Your teenage boy is not going to come to you and be like, hey, Mom, guess what? Unless you've set the stage of, it's okay to talk to me, right? And even with this, right? Like, it's okay if you've made a mistake. If you're drinking underage and you know that I'm not going to approve of that, okay? And you can still tell me about it because ultimately, I want you to be safe.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is that parents or adults, grown-ups, caregivers are the ones who are responsible for fostering these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can't leave it up to the kids to come to us with a problem. We need to be making it known that we are there to support them, that's our job. That's what we signed up for when we became the caregivers to these kids, is that our job is to walk them through these parts of life, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, when they are drinking underage, I know for a fact I drank underage, and I knew the whole time, kids talk about that, right?
Yeah.
When you're out with your friends, you're like, oh, if you got arrested, who would you call? Would you call, and almost
your brother, your whoever, your
it's
cousin.
almost always not the parents.
Yeah.
And that's something that we want to really try to focus on changing, right? We want those, I want it to be for my kids. I would call my mom because I know she's going to be there.
Right.
And sure, are they going to have consequences? You bet your bottom dollar they are.
Absolutely. But they're going to be safe and they're going to know.
They're going to know that they can call me. And, of course, I hope they have other people they can call too.
Sure.
But I don't want them to think they need to call someone else because
Mom's going to be so mad.
Or dad would kill me if I did that. I mean, how many times did we hear or say that as kids?
Yeah.
And we don't want that to be what our kids think of our relationship. We want them to be able to come to us for these things.
Yeah.
And with your teens, they're probably not going to respond, right? You're going to start that conversation about safe sex, and they're going to probably roll their eyes and walk away. But you still have to start it.
Yeah.
You still have to be the one who is putting these things and giving them the guidance that they need, because they're not going to come to you and say, please guide me.
Right. No, they won't. And that's something, I say in therapy, even with my adult clients. Sometimes I'm planting the seed, right? And so with those conversations with our older kids, you're just planting the seed, Hey, I know there's a lot going on in the world right now. Hey, I know that this shooting just happened at this rally. Have you heard anything about it? And just really broaching the topic, but then asking if they have questions. Because regardless of the age, they're going to have different questions. They might not have any, but then they know the door's open and this is something that I can talk about.
That doesn't mean, of course, if you're nervous about it, putting that on your kids.
Right.
This is not, your kids are not your therapists.
Right.
We don't need to be putting that on them. I think, Jenny, you probably see a lot of young adults in therapy that are going through these things that, oh, my mom treated me like I was her therapist. And she told me all the problems and all the things she hated about my dad. We don't want to do that.
No.
We want our kids to be our kids, and we need to be the grown-ups in the situation.
Right.
And so you can give them a little bit as they get older, give them a little bit of that, I feel the same way, or something, but we don't need to put all of our worries and burdens on our children either.
Yeah.
It's definitely a fine line you have to walk.
It is. It can be difficult. So hopefully we can get into, I know we have a list of a bunch of different kind of tough and interesting topics, so hopefully we can get into a little bit more of the nuance of those in coming episodes.
For sure. And if you have any questions that the kids or young people in your lives have asked, you can send them to us. Yeah. We have our email is the teacher and the therapist.
It's teacherandtherapistpod@gmail.com. We dropped the
just teacher and therapist. Teacherandtherapistpod@gmail.com. And you can also check us out on Instagram, Teacher and Therapist Pod.
All right. Bye for now.
See you next time.